Some of basketball's greatest moments didn't happen alone. They happened because two forces met, clashed, and elevated each other beyond what anyone imagined possible. This is the story of rivalries that built legends. Not battles of hatred, but confrontations that transformed good players into immortal ones. Tonight, we journey through the quiet fire that forged basketball's most unforgettable names. The league was dying. In the late 1970s, the National Basketball Association faced a crisis that threatened its very existence. Television ratings had plummeted. Finals games were broadcast on tape delay after the late-night news. Arenas sat half empty. The game that had once captivated America seemed to be fading into irrelevance, a forgotten corner of the sports world that couldn't compete with football or baseball for the nation's attention. And then, on March 26, 1979, something happened that would change everything. Two college teams met in Salt Lake City for the NCAA championship game. Michigan State, led by a smiling point guard named Irvin Johnson, faced Indiana State, carried by a quiet forward from French Lick, Indiana, named Larry Bird. The contrast was immediate and striking. Magic, as Johnson was called, played with joy radiating from every movement. Bird played with a blue-collar intensity that seemed carved from the small-town courts where he learned the game. That night, more than 35 million people watched. It became the highest-rated college basketball game in television history. Michigan State won 75-64. Magic celebrated with his trademark smile. Bird walked off the court with barely a change in expression, already thinking about what came next. Neither knew that their story was just beginning. Neither could imagine that their names would soon become inseparable. Two sides of the same golden coin that would rescue professional basketball from the darkness. The 1980 NBA draft brought them both into the professional ranks. Magic went first overall to the Los Angeles Lakers, a franchise with Hollywood glamour and championship expectations. Bird had already been drafted the year before by the Boston Celtics in a strategic move, waiting out his final college season. The stage was set. East Coast versus West Coast. Showtime versus blue-collar grit. The city of stars against the city of champions. But their rivalry didn't truly ignite until 1984. That spring, after years of near misses and what-ifs, the basketball gods finally gave fans what they wanted. Lakers versus Celtics in the NBA Finals. Boston Garden turned into a furnace. The old building had no air conditioning, and the series took place during an unusual heat wave. Temperatures inside reached over 90 degrees. Players cramped, tempers flared. The basketball was physical, sometimes brutal, always intense. The Celtics won Game 1, the Lakers responded with Game 2. Back and forth they went, each game a war of attrition. In Game 4, Kevin McHale clotheslined Kurt Rambis on a breakaway, sending a message that this series would be won by whoever wanted it more. The Lakers, talented and fast, seemed overwhelmed by Boston's physicality. Bird was everywhere, talking trash, hitting impossible shots, willing his team forward. The Celtics took Game 7 at home, 111-102. Larry Bird had his first championship. Magic Johnson tasted defeat. In the locker room afterward, Magic made a promise. Never again. He would not lose to Larry Bird again in the finals. He would not let his team be pushed around. He would not be outworked or out-toughed. The loss burned inside him like nothing he'd ever experienced. And that fire, that refusal to accept defeat, would forge him into something greater. 1 year later, they met again. 1985, Lakers versus Celtics, Round 2. This time, Los Angeles was ready. They played with a new edge, a determination that matched Boston's intensity. Magic was brilliant, controlling tempo, finding open teammates, rising to every challenge. The Lakers won the series in 6 games, finally capturing the championship on the parquet floor of Boston Garden, a symbolic victory that meant everything. After the final buzzer, Magic and Bird shared a moment of mutual respect. The rivalry had become something more than competition. It had become a mutual journey toward greatness. 1987 brought them together one final time in the finals. The series went 6 games, filled with memorable moments and dramatic swings. In Game 4, with the series tied, Magic Johnson hit a running junior skyhook over Bird and 2 other defenders in the final seconds. The shot barely kissed the backboard before dropping through the net. The forum exploded. The Lakers won, and Magic fell into Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's arms, overcome with emotion. After the series ended, Bird spoke with unusual candor about his rival. He said Magic might be the best player he'd ever competed against. Coming from Larry Bird, those words carried the weight of absolute truth.
The statistics tell part of the story. Larry Bird won 3 Most Valuable Player awards in consecutive years: 1984, 1985, and 1986. Magic Johnson matched him with 3 of his own: 1987, 1989, and 1990. They met 3 times in the NBA Finals, the matchup everyone wanted to see. Together, they combined for 8 championships. They made the All-Star Game must-watch television. They turned the NBA from a struggling league into a cultural phenomenon. But numbers don't capture the transformation they created. They saved basketball. Television ratings soared. Attendance broke records. Young people started playing the game again in driveways and parks across America. The rivalry transcended sport and became a narrative that captured the nation's imagination. 2 different paths to excellence, 2 different styles, 2 different coasts, all coming together in beautiful competition. Behind the scenes, something unexpected happened. They became friends. Not close friends who called each other every day, but men who recognized something profound in each other. They filmed a commercial together for Converse, making jokes and sharing genuine laughter. They spoke at each other's retirement ceremonies with emotion in their voices. When Magic announced his HIV diagnosis in 1991, Bird was devastated, calling it one of the worst days of his life. Years later, they'd sit together at All-Star games and finals. 2 old rivals who'd walked the same impossible road and understood each other in ways no one else could.
The legacy remains eternal. Without Magic and Bird, there might not be no modern NBA. Without their rivalry, Michael Jordan might have entered a league that didn't have the platform to showcase his greatness. They didn't just save basketball, they transformed it into the global force it became. They proved that rivalry and respect could coexist. They showed that making your opponent better made you better too. They didn't just compete, they completed each other's story. And in doing so, they wrote a story that still resonates today, decades after their final game. A story of how 2 men, so different in every way, needed each other to become who they were always meant to be: legends. In the beginning, there were giants. 2 men who stood above everyone else, literally and figuratively, who defined what it meant to dominate basketball in ways that had never been seen before and might never be seen again. Their rivalry wasn't just about basketball. It became a philosophical debate that still echoes through every basketball conversation today. What matters more, individual brilliance or team success? Can one man carry an entire franchise? Does winning championships define greatness? Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain gave us no easy answers. They gave us 2 different truths, both valid, both eternal.
Wilt Chamberlain arrived first, a 7'1" force of nature who seemed to have been designed in a laboratory to break basketball. He didn't just score, he overwhelmed the game itself, rewriting the record book with performances that seemed to violate the laws of physics and probability. On March 2, 1962, playing for the Philadelphia Warriors against the New York Knicks in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Wilt scored 100 points in a single game. 100. The number still seems impossible. He made 36 field goals and 28 free throws. He played all 48 minutes. The final score was 169 to 147, and Wilt had scored more than half his team's points alone.
That season, Wilt averaged 50.4 points per game. 50.4. No one has come close since. He averaged 48.5 minutes per game that season, despite games only being 48 minutes long, because he played every minute of several overtime games. The statistical dominance seemed to come from another dimension of basketball reality. He led the league in scoring 7 times. He grabbed 55 rebounds in a single game. He averaged 27 rebounds per game for an entire season. The numbers were so absurd, they almost stopped meaning anything. Wilt Chamberlain was basketball's answer to Babe Ruth, a figure so statistically dominant that he seemed to be playing a different game than everyone else. But in Boston, Bill Russell was playing a different game. He stood 6'9", shorter than Wilt, and scored far fewer points. Russell's game was built on defense, rebounding, and winning. He made his teammates better. He transformed the Celtics into the most dominant dynasty in professional sports history. Between 1957 and 1969, Bill Russell's Celtics won 11 championships in 13 seasons. 11. From 1959 to 1966, they won 8 consecutive titles, a streak that remains unmatched in NBA history. Russell and Chamberlain faced each other 94 times in regular season games and met repeatedly in the playoffs. The contrast was stark and endlessly fascinating. Wilt hunted scoring records and individual glory. Russell hunted championships and team success. Their games revealed 2 completely different philosophies about basketball and about life itself. In the 1962 Eastern Conference Finals, Wilt's Philadelphia Warriors faced Russell's Boston Celtics in a 7-game series that went down to the final seconds of Game 7. Wilt was spectacular, dominating statistically as he always did. But Russell's Celtics found a way to win, 109 to 107. Boston went on to win another championship. Wilt went home with impressive statistics and another playoff loss to Bill Russell. The pattern repeated itself over and over. Wilt would put up historic numbers, Russell would find ways to win. Critics began to question Chamberlain, suggesting he cared more about his statistics than about winning. The criticism hurt Wilt deeply. He knew he was the most dominant player on the court. He knew his teams were often less talented than Russell's Celtics, but the losses mounted, and with each loss, Russell's legacy grew stronger. Finally, in 1967, Wilt Chamberlain broke through. Playing for the Philadelphia 76ers, he led his team to the championship, defeating Russell's Celtics in the Eastern Division Finals and then beating the San Francisco Warriors in the finals. Wilt was vindicated. He had his ring. He had proven he could win. The monkey was off his back.
But Russell wasn't finished. In 1968 and 69, now serving as player-coach of the Celtics, Russell led Boston to 2 more championships. The 1969 finals became the final chapter of their rivalry, a perfect encapsulation of everything they represented. Russell's Celtics faced Wilt's Los Angeles Lakers in a 7-game series. The Lakers were heavily favored. They had Wilt, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor. They had home court advantage. Game 7 was at the Forum in Los Angeles. Everything pointed toward a Lakers victory. Russell, at age 35 in his final season, refused to let the story end any other way. The Celtics won Game 7, 108-106, claiming the championship on the Lakers' home floor. It was Russell's 11th ring. Wilt watched the celebration with quiet devastation, knowing he'd been so close to cementing his legacy with another championship, only to lose to Bill Russell one more time. Years later, after both men had retired, their respect for each other finally became public. Wilt called Russell the greatest winner in basketball history. Russell called Wilt the most talented player he'd ever faced. They attended each other's events. They spoke with genuine warmth about their battles. The rivalry that had seemed so bitter and competitive revealed itself as something deeper. Two great men pushing each other to heights neither could have reached alone.
The philosophical debate they created still hasn't been resolved. Which matters more, individual greatness or team success? Wilt's statistical dominance remains unmatched. His records might stand forever. But Russell's 11 championships, 8 consecutive, speak to something equally important, something harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. He knew how to win when everything was on the line. He made everyone around him better. He sacrificed personal glory for team triumph. They were both right. That's the beautiful truth that emerges from their rivalry. Basketball is big enough for both philosophies. Greatness comes in different forms. One man can dominate the game statistically and be legendary. Another can dominate through leadership and winning and be equally legendary. Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain didn't just define the center position. They defined the eternal question that makes basketball fascinating. What does greatness really mean? And perhaps the answer is that it means both of them, forever locked in competition, forever pushing each other, forever showing us that there's more than one path to immortality. Sometimes the opponent who hurts you most becomes the one who shapes you forever. Sometimes the team that blocks your path to greatness teaches you exactly what it takes to break through. Michael Jordan entered the NBA in 1984 with supernatural talent and unlimited confidence. He could score at will. He could fly. He had the work ethic and the competitive fire that everyone said would translate into championships. But there was a problem. A team standing in his way. The Detroit Pistons. And at the heart of that team, a point guard named Isiah Thomas, who would teach Michael Jordan the hardest and most valuable lesson of his life.
The Detroit Pistons of the late 1980s were known by a name that captured their essence perfectly: the Bad Boys. They played physical, borderline violent basketball, designed to intimidate and overwhelm opponents. They led the league in flagrant fouls. They took pride in their reputation. They had Rick Mahorn and Bill Laimbeer enforcing the paint, Dennis Rodman defending with manic energy, and Isiah Thomas orchestrating everything with a smile on his face that never quite reached his eyes. And they had something else. They had a defensive scheme designed specifically to stop Michael Jordan. They called it the Jordan Rules. The concept was simple but brutal. Anytime Jordan drove to the basket, hit him hard, make him feel every shot, make him think twice about coming into the lane, force him to beat you with jump shots, never let him get comfortable, never give him easy baskets, physically exhaust him, break his will if possible, break his body if necessary. It worked. In 1988, Jordan's Chicago Bulls faced the Pistons in the Eastern Conference semifinals.
Detroit won the series in 5 games. Jordan averaged 27 points per game, but he couldn't carry the Bulls past Detroit's defense and physical play. The Bulls went home. The Pistons went to the finals, where they lost to the Lakers.
1 year later, they met again. 1989 Eastern Conference Finals. This time, the series went 6 games, but the result was the same. The Pistons won. Jordan was brilliant, averaging 29.7 points per game. But it wasn't enough. Detroit's defense and physicality overwhelmed Chicago in the key moments. The Pistons went on to win their first championship, sweeping the Lakers in the finals. Isiah Thomas held the trophy with tears streaming down his face. Vindication for all the years of being called dirty, all the criticism, all the doubt. For Michael Jordan, the loss cut deeper than any before. He'd proven he could score. He'd won the MVP award. He'd become the face of the NBA. But he couldn't beat Detroit. He couldn't get past Isiah and the bad boys. And the criticism started. Maybe Jordan was too selfish. Maybe he cared more about scoring than winning. Maybe he'd never figure out how to make his teammates better. Maybe he'd never win a championship. 1990 brought them together one more time. Eastern Conference Finals again. Detroit had won back-to-back championships and seemed unstoppable. The Bulls seemed close, but not quite ready. The series went 7 games, physical and intense as always. In Game 7 at the Palace of Auburn Hills, the Pistons destroyed the Bulls, 93-74. It wasn't even close. Jordan played well, but couldn't overcome Detroit's collective strength. The Pistons went on to their 3rd straight finals. Jordan went home again, facing another summer of questions and doubts. But something had changed in that series. The Bulls had pushed Detroit to 7 games. They'd shown they were getting stronger, and Michael Jordan had learned exactly what it took to win a championship. He'd learned from watching Isiah's Pistons that talent alone wasn't enough. You needed toughness. You needed a killer instinct. You needed to impose your will on opponents, to make them fear you, to never back down from physical play. The bad boys had taught him by beating him. They'd forged him in fire he couldn't escape.
The next season, 1991, everything changed. The Bulls and Pistons met in the Eastern Conference Finals for the 4th straight year. But this time, the Bulls were different. They were stronger. They were tougher. They had learned from their defeats. And Michael Jordan had become something more than just a great scorer. He'd become a winner. Chicago swept Detroit, 4-0. They dominated every game, leaving no doubt who the better team was. The power had shifted. The throne had been taken. And in the final seconds of Game 4 at the Palace of Auburn Hills, with the Pistons dynasty officially over, something controversial happened. Isiah Thomas and several Pistons players walked off the court before the final buzzer sounded, refusing to shake hands with the Bulls. 8.7 seconds remained on the clock when they left. The incident became infamous. Critics called it classless and unsportsmanlike. The Pistons said they'd been victims of the same treatment in previous years and were simply returning the favor. Isiah later expressed some regret about it, but also defended the decision. For Michael Jordan, it didn't matter. He had beaten them. He had broken through the wall that had blocked him for 3 years. That June, the Bulls beat the Lakers in the finals, winning the first of 6 championships. The dynasty had begun.
But the rivalry left scars that never fully healed. When the Dream Team was being assembled for the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona, Isiah Thomas was left off the roster despite being one of the best players in the league. Reports suggested that Michael Jordan had influenced the decision, telling USA Basketball he wouldn't play if Isiah was on the team. Both Jordan and USA Basketball officials denied this version of events, but the perception remained. Isiah watched the Dream Team win gold from home, excluded from the most celebrated team in basketball history. The personal animosity between Jordan and Isiah lasted decades. They rarely spoke. They gave conflicting accounts of their rivalry in interviews. When Isiah was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2000, Jordan didn't attend. The Bad Boys' legacy remained controversial, seen by some as tough defense and by others as dirty play designed to injure. But from a distance, the truth becomes clear. The Detroit Pistons and Isiah Thomas made Michael Jordan who he became. They showed him what championship basketball looked like. They taught him that skill and talent weren't enough, that you had to be willing to impose your will on opponents, to never back down, to develop a killer instinct that separated good from great. Every hard foul, every physical series, every bitter defeat became a lesson that Jordan absorbed and transformed into fuel for his dynasty. Isiah Thomas won 2 championships before Jordan won any. He proved that a smaller guard could lead a team to titles. He showed that championships required toughness and team play. And then Michael Jordan took those lessons, added his supernatural talent, and built the greatest dynasty in modern NBA history. 6 championships, 6 Finals MVP awards, a legacy that transcended basketball.
They needed each other. Jordan needed someone to show him the path. Isiah needed someone to pass the torch to. The Bad Boys had to fall for the Bulls to rise. And while the personal animosity remained, the basketball truth was simple. Without Isiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons, Michael Jordan might never have become Michael Jordan. Sometimes, your greatest teacher is the opponent who refuses to let you win until you've learned everything you need to know. Sometimes the rivalry that hurts most is the one that saves you. Isiah Thomas taught Michael Jordan how to be a champion by being the champion Jordan couldn't beat. And in that teaching, in that brutal education, a legend was forged that still burns bright today. Some rivalries explode with trash talk and personal drama. Some burn with visible hatred and public feuds. And some unfold quietly, year after year, 2 masters practicing their craft at the highest level, pushing each other through pure excellence without ever raising their voices. Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan gave us the latter. For over a decade and a half, they waged a silent war. Their rivalry defined not by what they said, but by what they did on the court, night after night, playoff series after playoff series, championship after championship.
They couldn't have been more different. Kobe Bryant played with fire, visible in every movement. He trash-talked. He showed emotion. He took contested shots with defenders draped over him and seemed to prefer the difficulty. He was flash and flare, wrapped in purple and gold, playing for the most glamorous franchise in basketball in the entertainment capital of the world. His game was beautiful and theatrical. Every move designed not just to score, but to make a statement. Tim Duncan was the opposite. He played with the emotional range of a man filing his taxes. He called bank shots in the playoffs. He wore boring clothes to press conferences. He perfected the most fundamental aspects of basketball: the pick and roll, the box out, the bounce pass, with such mastery that he made excellence look routine. He played in San Antonio, far from the spotlight, for a coach who valued system over style. His game was poetry written in the language of efficiency. And yet, somehow, they produced the exact same result: immortality. The Lakers dynasty came first. From 2000 to 2002, Los Angeles won 3 consecutive championships. Shaquille O'Neal was the dominant force,
the Finals MVP all 3 years. But Kobe was the closer, the one who took and made the biggest shots in the biggest moments. They swept through the Western Conference those years like a force of nature, overwhelming opponents with talent and execution. The Spurs provided the counterpoint. Tim Duncan won his first championship in 1999 in a lockout-shortened season that proved his greatness from the start. Then came 2003, 2005, 2007, and finally 2014. 5 championships spread across 15 years, each one built on the same foundation: Duncan's excellence, Greg Popovich's coaching, and a system that prioritized team basketball over individual glory. Between 1999 and 2013, the Lakers and Spurs met 5 times in the playoffs. Each series became a referendum on 2 different paths to greatness. Each series revealed something about what it takes to build a dynasty that lasts. The 2001 Western Conference Finals might have been the most dominant display. The Lakers swept the Spurs in 4 games on their way to their 2nd consecutive championship. Shaq was unstoppable. Kobe was brilliant. San Antonio couldn't find an answer. The gap seemed enormous. The Lakers were ascending to heights that seemed unreachable. But 2 years later, the dynamic had shifted. The 2003 Western Conference semifinals brought them together again, and this time the Spurs won in 6 games. Tim Duncan was magnificent, averaging 28 points and 11 rebounds per game. The Spurs went on to win the championship, their 2nd title. Duncan won Finals MVP. The balance of power had shifted.
2004 brought one of the most memorable moments in playoff history. Western Conference semifinals again. Game 5 in San Antonio, tied at 2 games apiece. The Spurs led by 1 point with seconds remaining. Derek Fisher caught an inbound pass near the 3-point line, turned, and shot in one motion. 0.4 seconds had elapsed. The shot went in. The Lakers won. The crowd sat in stunned silence. The series shifted completely, and the Lakers won Game 6 to advance. Kobe went to the finals, though the Pistons would eventually win the championship. 4 years later, they met again. 2008 Western Conference Finals. By now, Shaq was long gone from Los Angeles. Kobe had won his only MVP award that season and was determined to prove he could win a championship without O'Neal. The Lakers won the series in 5 games, with Kobe dominating. He didn't win the championship that year, losing to Boston in the finals. But the next 2 years brought redemption. Back-to-back titles in 2009 and 2010. Tim Duncan just kept going. He won his 5th championship in 2014 at age 38, long after many thought his best days were behind him. The Spurs dismantled LeBron James's Miami Heat in 5 games with some of the most beautiful team basketball ever played. Duncan averaged 15 points and 10 rebounds, doing exactly what was needed. Nothing more, nothing less. It was his final championship, a perfect ending to a perfect career. The numbers tell a remarkable story. 5 championships each, both first-ballot Hall of Famers. Both played 20 seasons with one franchise. Both had their jerseys retired. Both are considered among the greatest players at their positions in NBA history. Kobe finished with 33,643 points, 4th all-time when he retired. Duncan finished with 26,496 points and 15,091 rebounds.
But the numbers only capture part of what made their rivalry special. What made it unique was the mutual respect that existed from the beginning and never wavered. They didn't need to talk trash. They didn't need drama. They let their games speak. After big wins against each other, they'd shake hands and exchange brief words. In retirement, Kobe called Tim Duncan the greatest power forward ever. Duncan called Kobe one of the toughest competitors he'd faced. Their rivalry proved something important. There's no single path to basketball greatness. Kobe's way was valid. Duncan's way was equally valid. Flash and fundamentals could coexist in the same era and produce the same result. You could be emotional or stoic. You could shoot difficult jumpers or execute perfect pick and rolls. You could play for the spotlight or avoid it. None of it mattered as long as you did it at the highest level, night after night, year after year. They showed an entire generation that style doesn't define substance. Kobe's game was beautiful to watch, full of difficult shots and acrobatic finishes. Duncan's game was methodical, built on positioning and footwork and perfect fundamentals. Both were right. Both were legendary. Both were immortal.
And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of their rivalry. Basketball is big enough for different approaches. Greatness comes in many forms. The silent war they waged wasn't about proving one way was better than the other. It was about proving that excellence has many faces, and all of them deserve respect. Two completely different men who approached the game from opposite directions. The exact same result. Dynasty, dominance, and immortality. That's not a coincidence. That's the beauty of basketball itself. Big enough for all forms of greatness. Rich enough to celebrate both the flash and the fundamental, the fire and the calm. Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan didn't need to be rivals in the traditional sense. They just needed to exist at the same time, pushing each other through sheer excellence, showing the world that there's always more than one way to be great. And in that silent war, played out over hundreds of games across 15 years, they wrote a story that still resonates today. A story of two paths leading to the same place. A story of respect earned through competition. A story of excellence as its own rivalry, needing no words, only results. History doesn't often give us perfect stories. It doesn't usually arrange events into neat narratives with clear beginnings, middles, and ends. But sometimes, rarely, the basketball gods align everything just right, and we get 4 consecutive years that feel like destiny itself decided to make a movie. From 2015 to 2018, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State Warriors met in the NBA Finals every single year. LeBron James and Stephen Curry, two completely different superstars representing two completely different eras of basketball, gave us an epic that defined a generation.
The Warriors' rise happened quickly. Stephen Curry, undersized and overlooked coming out of Davidson College, transformed himself into the greatest shooter in basketball history. He didn't just make three-pointers. He made three-pointers from distances that seemed absurd, off the dribble, with defenders in his face, with the game on the line. He changed the geometry of the court itself. His range extended to 30 feet. His release was instant. His confidence was absolute. Around him, the Warriors built a system designed to maximize his gifts. They played fast. They moved the ball. They shot threes at unprecedented rates. They were fun, joyful, beautiful to watch. The 2014-15 season saw them win 67 games. They marched through the playoffs with a combination of shooting and defense that overwhelmed opponents. And waiting for them in the finals was LeBron James's Cleveland Cavaliers.
LeBron had returned to Cleveland the previous summer after 4 years in Miami. He'd promised to bring a championship to his home state to end the title drought that had haunted Cleveland sports for over 50 years. The 2015 finals seemed like his chance. But in the first 2 games, he lost both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love to injuries. He played the rest of the series essentially alone, surrounded by role players, facing a Warriors team playing the best basketball in the league.
LeBron was heroic. He averaged 35.8 points, 13.3 rebounds, and 8.8 assists per game. He played 45 minutes per game. He carried an offensive load that would have crushed most players. But it wasn't enough. The Warriors won the series in 6 games. Stephen Curry had his first championship. LeBron walked off the court exhausted and empty-handed, knowing he'd given everything and still come up short. 1 year later, they met again, but this time the stakes felt even higher. The Warriors had just completed the greatest regular season in NBA history. 73 wins, 9 losses, breaking the Chicago Bulls record of 72 wins set in 1996. Stephen Curry won the first unanimous MVP in NBA history. The Warriors seemed unstoppable, inevitable, perfect. The finals started as expected. Golden State won the first 2 games at home, dominating both. They won Game 3 in Cleveland. They led the series 3-1. No team in NBA Finals history had ever come back from a 3-1 deficit. The Warriors were 1 victory away from completing the perfect season, and the celebration seemed inevitable. And then, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving did something impossible. They won Game 5 in Oakland, with LeBron scoring 41 points. They won Game 6 at home with LeBron putting up 41 again. And in Game 7, back in Oakland, they completed the comeback. The game was tight throughout, neither team able to pull away. With under 2 minutes remaining and the score tied, LeBron made the block, chasing down Andre Iguodala from behind and swatting his layup attempt off the backboard in what became one of the most iconic defensive plays in finals history. Moments later, Kyrie Irving hit a 3-pointer over Stephen Curry that gave Cleveland the lead for good. Final score, 93-89.
LeBron collapsed to the floor in tears when the buzzer sounded. Cleveland had its first championship in over 50 years. LeBron had fulfilled his promise. The Warriors' perfect season had ended in the most painful way possible, and the rivalry had reached its peak, a moment so dramatic and meaningful that it felt almost scripted. But the story wasn't over. That summer, Kevin Durant made a decision that changed everything. He left the Oklahoma City Thunder and joined the Golden State Warriors, teaming up with Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green to form perhaps the most talented team ever assembled. The move was controversial. Critics called Durant weak for joining the team that had just beaten him. But the Warriors didn't care about criticism. They cared about championships. 2017 brought them together for the 3rd straight year. This time, the series wasn't close. The Warriors won in 5 games, their talent and depth overwhelming Cleveland despite another brilliant performance from LeBron. Kevin Durant won Finals MVP. The Warriors had their revenge. 2018 made it 4 straight years. 4 consecutive finals between the same 2 teams, something that had never happened before in NBA history. The Warriors swept the Cavaliers in 4 games. Though LeBron played perhaps the best individual game of his life in Game 1, scoring 51 points in a losing effort. The dynasty was complete. The Warriors had won 3 of the 4 series. The rivalry had reached its conclusion.
But something remarkable had happened over those 4 years. The rivalry had transcended basketball. It became a cultural phenomenon. It split fans into camps. It sparked endless debates about whether LeBron's individual brilliance or Curry's team success mattered more. It changed how basketball was played, with teams across the league copying the Warriors' emphasis on three-point shooting and ball movement. LeBron James averaged 34 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists across those 4 final series. He played every game like it might be his last. Stephen Curry won 3 championships and revolutionized offensive basketball. Kevin Durant won 2 Finals MVPs and proved he could win anywhere. The individual performances were legendary. But more than that, the era itself became legendary. They changed the game. The Warriors' success led to a league-wide revolution in how teams played offense. The three-point shot became essential rather than supplementary. Pace increased. Post-up big men became less valuable. Shooting and spacing became everything. Young players grew up imitating Stephen Curry's long-range shooting rather than previous generations' post moves and mid-range games. LeBron's sustained excellence across those 4 years reinforced his case as one of the greatest players ever. He reached 8 consecutive finals from 2011 to 2018. He carried teams that had no business being there. He put up historic numbers at an age when most players had already declined. He showed that different kinds of greatness could coexist in the same era.
Beyond basketball, both men used their platforms for social change. LeBron opened a school in Akron for underprivileged children. Curry spoke out on political issues and supported various causes. They redefined what it meant to be an athlete in the modern era, proving that influence extended far beyond the court. The rivalry also showed us something about respect. Despite the intensity of their battles, LeBron and Curry consistently praised each other in public. They played together on Team USA. They spoke warmly about each other's games. There was no hatred, no personal animosity, just 2 great players pushing each other to be better. That might be the most important legacy of their rivalry. In an era of social media and hot takes, where everything gets amplified and dramatized, they showed that competition doesn't require hatred. You can battle someone for 4 straight years in the finals, give everything you have to beat them, and still respect them as a person and a player. You can be rivals without being enemies. 4 years, 4 finals, 3 Warriors championships, 1 Cavaliers championship. But that one championship, that 3-1 comeback in 2016, might matter more than all the others combined. It was the crowning achievement of LeBron's career, the moment that validated his return to Cleveland and secured his legacy. And for the Warriors, it was the loss that motivated everything that came after, the fuel that pushed them to add Kevin Durant and complete their dynasty. They turned 4 years into an era. They turned an era into legend. And when it was over, when LeBron left Cleveland for Los Angeles, and the Warriors eventually fell apart due to injuries and departures, what remained was the memory of something special, something rare, something that felt like the basketball gods had arranged every detail to give us the perfect modern rivalry. 2 different players, 2 different teams, 2 different coasts, 4 consecutive years of the highest stakes basketball. And in those 4 years, they showed us that greatness recognizes greatness, that rivalry elevates everyone involved, and that sometimes, just sometimes, history gives us exactly the story we need. Before Shaquille O'Neal became a champion, before he won 3 consecutive Finals MVP awards, Before he became the most dominant force in modern NBA history, he had to learn a lesson. The teacher was Hakeem Olajuwon. The classroom was the 1995 Western Conference Finals. The education was painful, unforgettable, and ultimately transformative. They represented two completely different approaches to playing center. Shaquille O'Neal was power incarnate. At 7'1" and over 300 pounds in his prime, he moved with shocking speed and agility for his size. He could dunk with such force that he broke backboards. He could overpower any defender who tried to stop him in the post. His game was about dominance through sheer physical superiority. He made basketball look simple. Get the ball close to the basket, impose your will, score, repeat.
Hakeem Olajuwon was finesse and skill elevated to art. At 7 feet tall, he moved like a ballet dancer. His footwork was so precise, so creative, that players still study video of his moves decades later. The Dream Shake became legendary, a series of fakes, pivots, and spins that left defenders frozen, unsure which way he'd go, unable to stop him even when they knew it was coming. He could shoot from mid-range. He could pass. He could defend at an elite level, blocking shots and disrupting offenses with his timing and intelligence. When they first met in the playoffs, the contrast was immediate. The 1995 Western Conference Finals pitted Olajuwon's Houston Rockets against O'Neal's Orlando Magic. The Magic were young and talented. Shaq was in his third season, already a superstar. They had Anthony Hardaway running the point, one of the most gifted players in the league. They had Horace Grant, Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson. They'd swept Michael Jordan's Bulls in the second round. They seemed destined for greatness. The Rockets were defending champions, having won the title in 1994 after Jordan's first retirement created an opening. Hakeem had dominated that playoff run, winning Finals MVP. But they weren't favorites against Orlando. The Magic were younger, faster, more athletic. Most experts picked Orlando to win.
The series was a masterclass. Hakeem Olajuwon completely outplayed Shaquille O'Neal. Game after game, he used his skill and experience to neutralize Shaq's power. The Dream Shake was unstoppable. He scored from every angle. He blocked Shaq's shots. He forced him into difficult positions. And when the series ended, Houston had swept Orlando, 4-0. The Rockets went on to win their second consecutive championship. Hakeem won his second straight Finals MVP. For Shaquille O'Neal, the loss was devastating. He'd been outplayed by an older center who didn't match his physical dominance but exceeded his skill level. The criticism was immediate. Shaq was too raw. He relied too much on power. He didn't have the post moves necessary to dominate elite competition. He needed to develop his game or risk never winning a championship. The lesson burned inside him. Over the next few years, Shaq worked on his post game. He studied Hakeem's footwork. He developed a wider array of moves. He didn't abandon his power, but he added finesse to his arsenal. The drop step became deadly. The spin move improved. The up and under was added to his repertoire. He took what Hakeem had shown him and incorporated it into his own game. In 1996, Shaq left Orlando for the Los Angeles Lakers. The move was controversial, but it put him in position to build a dynasty. Alongside Kobe Bryant and under coach Phil Jackson, Shaq transformed into the most dominant player in basketball. From 2000 to 2002, the Lakers won 3 consecutive championships. Shaq won Finals MVP all 3 years. He was unstoppable, combining his natural power with the improved skill he'd developed.
The ghost of that sweep by Hakeem never fully left him, though. Years later, Shaq would talk about Hakeem with reverence. He called him the most skilled big man he'd ever played against. He credited Hakeem with teaching him what it took to win at the highest level. The respect was genuine and deep. He'd learned from the best, been beaten by the best, and then used those lessons to become the best himself. Hakeem's legacy stands apart in NBA history. He's the only player to record more than 200 blocks and 200 steals in the same season, a feat that showcases his defensive genius. He won Defensive Player of the Year twice. He made 12 All-Star teams. He retired as one of the top 10 shot blockers in NBA history. His 2 championships came in perhaps the toughest era for winning, competing against teams led by Jordan, Shaq, David Robinson, and Patrick Ewing. What made Hakeem special was how he dominated without overwhelming physical advantages. He was tall and athletic, yes, but his greatness came from intelligence and skill. He outthought defenders. He had counters to his counters. He made basketball look like chess played at full speed. Young centers still watch his highlights to learn footwork. Coaches still use his moves as teaching tools. The Dream Shake remains the most beautiful post move in basketball history.
Shaq's dominance came later, but burned brighter in its peak. Those 3 years from 2000 to 2002 might represent the most unstoppable any player has been. He averaged 38 points and 16 rebounds in the 2000 finals. He was so dominant that teams changed their entire roster construction to find players who could slow him down, even slightly. The hack-a-Shaq strategy emerged, fouling him intentionally because his free throw shooting was so poor. Nothing really worked. When Shaq wanted to dominate, he dominated. Their rivalry wasn't about hatred or personal animosity. It was about one great player teaching another through competition. Hakeem showed Shaq what complete center play looked like. Shaq took those lessons and combined them with his unmatched physical gifts to create something unstoppable. Different paths, different peaks, but both reached the summit. The story of their rivalry is really a story about growth, about a young player getting beaten by an older master and then using that defeat as motivation to become greater, about respect earned through competition, about how losing can be more valuable than winning if you're willing to learn from it. One taught the other, and both became eternal. Hakeem with his grace and skill, Shaq with his power and dominance. 2 centers who proved there's more than one way to be great. 2 titans who showed that basketball is beautiful enough to celebrate both finesse and force. Years after both retired, they remained linked. When people debate the greatest centers in NBA history, both names appear on every list. When young big men need examples of greatness, both highlight reels get shown. When basketball history is told, both stories matter.
And somewhere in that history, in that rivalry, is a perfect lesson about how greatness recognizes greatness, how defeat can forge champions, and how sometimes the opponent who beats you becomes the teacher who makes you. Some rivalries are defined by close battles and shared glory. Others are defined by dominance on one side and heartbreak on the other. Jerry West versus Bill Russell gave us the latter. Perhaps the most tragic rivalry in NBA history. A story of a brilliant player who ran into an unstoppable force 6 times in the finals and lost every single time, except once after his rival had retired. A story that proves greatness isn't only measured by championships, but by how you compete when fate seems determined to deny you. Jerry West was perfect for basketball. 6'2", athletic, with a pure shooting stroke that made the ball look like it was on a string to the basket. He could score from anywhere. He could pass. He could defend. He played with intelligence and intensity that made him one of the most complete guards the game had ever seen. His Lakers teams in the 1960s were talented, featuring Elgin Baylor and later Wilt Chamberlain. They should have won championships. They deserved to win championships. But standing in their way every time was Bill Russell's Boston Celtics, the greatest dynasty in professional sports. The team that won 11 championships in 13 years. The team that seemed to find ways to win even when they probably shouldn't. And at the center of that dynasty, literally and figuratively, was Russell, the ultimate winner. The player who valued team success above everything else.
The finals meetings started in 1962. Lakers versus Celtics. Game 7 in Boston. The game went to overtime. The Lakers had chances to win. Frank Selvey missed a shot at the buzzer in regulation that would have given Los Angeles the championship. In overtime, Boston pulled away, winning 110-107. Jerry West played brilliantly, scoring 35 points. It wasn't enough. The Celtics celebrated. West went home empty-handed. 1 year later, they met again. 1963 Finals. Celtics won in 6 games. West averaged 27 points per game. Still not enough. Another championship for Russell. Another disappointed summer for West. 1965 brought them together in the finals once more. The series went 7 games again. The Lakers fought hard. They had home court advantage. Game 7 was in Los Angeles. They led most of the game. With 5 seconds left, the Lakers had the ball and a chance to tie or win. John Havlicek stole the inbound pass. The Celtics won, 110-109. Jerry West had been magnificent throughout the series. It didn't matter. Russell had another ring. The pattern continued. 1966 Finals, Celtics in 7 games. 1968 Finals, Celtics in 6 games. Every time, West would play at an incredibly high level. Every time, the Celtics would find a way to win. The losses piled up, each one more painful than the last. West developed a reputation as a player who couldn't win the big one, despite playing brilliantly in the biggest games. The 1969 Finals became the defining moment of their rivalry. Lakers versus Celtics one more time. Bill Russell was in his final season, serving as player-coach. He was 35 years old. The Lakers had acquired Wilt Chamberlain to finally get past Boston. They had home court advantage. Game 7 was at the Forum in Los Angeles. The Lakers were heavily favored. Everything pointed toward Los Angeles finally breaking through. Jerry West played one of the greatest final series in history. He averaged 37.9 points, 7.4 assists, and 4.7 rebounds per game. In Game 7, he scored 42 points with 13 rebounds. He was transcendent, playing at a level that should have guaranteed victory. The Celtics won anyway, 108-106. Russell, in his final game, grabbed 21 rebounds and led Boston to one more championship, his 11th ring. Jerry West's 6th finals loss to Russell's Celtics, the cruelest ending possible. But something remarkable happened after that series. Jerry West won the Finals MVP award despite being on the losing team. It remains the only time in NBA history that the Finals MVP has come from the losing side. The voters recognized what everyone saw. West had been the best player in the series. He'd done everything possible to win. He played at a level that transcended the final score. His performance deserved recognition even in defeat.
The award provided small comfort for West, who desperately wanted a championship, but it spoke to something important about his legacy.
Greatness isn't only about winning, it's about how you compete. It's about playing at the highest level even when circumstances conspire against you. It's about refusing to give up even when fate seems determined to deny you. 1 year after Russell retired, Jerry West finally won his championship. The 1972 Lakers won 69 games and steamrolled through the playoffs, defeating the New York Knicks in 5 games in the finals. West averaged 21.8 points per game at age 33, finally holding the trophy he'd chased for over a decade. The celebration was sweet, tinged with the memory of all the losses that had come before. West's career statistics tell a story of excellence. He made 14 All-Star teams. He won a scoring title. He made the All-NBA First Team 10 times. He averaged 27 points per game for his career, still among the highest in NBA history. His playoff performances were legendary. In the 1970 finals, he averaged 31.3 points per game. He showed up when the stakes were highest. And then there's the logo. In 1969, the NBA needed a new symbol. They chose Jerry West's silhouette, a simple but elegant image of him dribbling. For over 50 years, that image has represented the entire league. Every NBA jersey, every piece of official merchandise, every broadcast carries Jerry West's image. He became the face of basketball itself, the ultimate recognition of his greatness.
Bill Russell always spoke about West with deep respect. He called him the greatest guard he'd ever faced. He said West was the toughest opponent, the player who never gave up, no matter what the score was. Coming from Russell, who'd beaten him 6 times in the finals, those words carried tremendous weight. Russell didn't have to praise West, but he did, sincerely and repeatedly, because he recognized greatness when he competed against it. The tragic element of their rivalry makes it more meaningful, not less. Jerry West's story resonates because it's human. We've all faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable. We've all experienced defeat despite our best efforts. We've all wondered if we'd ever break through. West's 6 finals losses to Russell's Celtics feel like our own struggles magnified and played out on basketball's biggest stage. But his story is also about persistence, about continuing to compete even when winning seems impossible, about playing at your highest level even when the outcome seems predetermined, about refusing to let defeat define you. West could have given up. He could have demanded a trade. He could have let the losses break his spirit. Instead, he kept competing, kept improving, kept showing up year after year to face the same opponent who'd beaten him over and over.
And in the end, he got his ring. He became the logo. He built a Hall of Fame career. He proved that you can lose more finals than almost anyone and still be legendary. That's not a consolation. That's a truth about greatness that transcends sports. You can be legendary without winning every time. You can be great while losing to someone greater. You can fall short of the ultimate goal and still accomplish something meaningful. Jerry West showed us all of that. He lost to Bill Russell 6 times in the finals and became one of the most respected players in NBA history anyway. That's not tragic. That's triumphant. That's the real legacy of their rivalry. Not the losses, but what West did with them. Not the defeats, but the excellence he displayed in defeat. Not the championships he didn't win, but the respect he earned from everyone who watched him compete. He lost more than almost anyone and became more than almost everyone.
That's the story of Jerry West and Bill Russell. That's the beautiful, tragic, ultimately inspiring truth of the rivalry that defined a generation. They entered the NBA in the same draft class, 1997. Both were chosen in the top 5 picks. Both were power forwards who would revolutionize the position. Both would become defensive anchors who changed games without needing the ball. Both would lead their teams to championships and multiple finals appearances. And both would define excellence for over 15 years, setting a standard that power forwards still chase today.
But they couldn't have been more different in how they achieved it. Kevin Garnett played with volcanic intensity. He screamed. He chest-bumped teammates. He talked trash to opponents and referees alike. His emotions were always visible, burning on the surface for everyone to see. He was 7 feet tall, but played like a point guard, handling the ball, making passes that most big men couldn't imagine. His defensive energy was relentless, contesting every shot, diving for every loose ball, playing every possession like his life depended on it. Tim Duncan was the opposite. Calm, quiet, fundamentally sound in everything he did. He didn't celebrate wildly after big plays. He didn't talk trash. He just executed, play after play, game after game, season after season. His game was built on perfect technique, footwork in the post, boxing out for rebounds, setting solid screens. He made excellence look routine. He made winning look inevitable. Despite their differences, they respected each other deeply. And every time they met in the playoffs, basketball fans got to witness 2 completely different approaches to greatness clash at the highest level. The early battles went to Duncan and the Spurs. In 1999, San Antonio won the championship in Duncan's second season. The Spurs swept Garnett's Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round of the playoffs. The gap seemed enormous. The Spurs were a championship team. The Timberwolves were still building.
Over the next few years, the dynamic didn't change much. The Spurs remained a powerhouse. The Timberwolves kept losing in the early playoff rounds, despite Garnett's brilliance. In 2003, the matchup came in the Western Conference semifinals. Garnett had just won the MVP award, averaging 23 points, 13.4 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.4 steals per game during the regular season. He'd elevated his game to an all-time level. It should have been Minnesota's breakthrough moment. The Spurs won in 6 games. Tim Duncan was magnificent, averaging 28 points and 11.7 rebounds per series. The Spurs went on to win the championship, Duncan's second title. For Garnett, it was another painful lesson about the gap between individual greatness and team success. But the next year brought vindication. 2004 Western Conference semifinals. Same matchup, higher stakes. The Timberwolves had improved their roster. Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell gave Garnett the help he needed. The series went 6 games again, but this time Minnesota broke through. Garnett averaged 23.3 points and 15.3 rebounds. The Timberwolves won, finally beating Duncan and the Spurs in a playoff series. Minnesota reached the Western Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history. Though the Lakers eliminated the Timberwolves in that conference finals, something had shifted. Garnett had proven he could beat Duncan when it mattered most. The rivalry felt balanced. 2 great players capable of beating each other depending on who had the better team around them. Then came 2007, and Kevin Garnett's career changed forever. After 11 seasons in Minnesota, after countless playoff disappointments,
He was traded to the Boston Celtics. He joined Paul Pierce and Ray Allen to form the original Big Three. For the first time in his career, Garnett had real championship-level talent around him.
The transformation was immediate. The Celtics won 66 games. Garnett won Defensive Player of the Year. His intensity, channeled through a team that matched his competitiveness, became overwhelming for opponents. In the playoffs, Boston marched through the Eastern Conference and met the Lakers in the finals. They won in 6 games. Kevin Garnett finally had his championship. He screamed into the night sky after the clinching game. Years of frustration and disappointment released in one primal roar of triumph. Tim Duncan just kept adding to his own legacy. His 3rd championship came in 2005. His 4th came in 2007, the same year Garnett went to Boston. And incredibly, Duncan's 5th championship came in 2014, when he was 38 years old. The Spurs defeated LeBron James in the Miami Heat in 5 games, with some of the most beautiful team basketball ever played. Duncan averaged 15.4 points and rebounds per game, doing exactly what was needed, nothing more or less. The final statistical comparison tells a story of parallel greatness. Tim Duncan finished with 5 championships. Garnett finished with 1, but both were first-ballot Hall of Famers. Both made 15 All-Star teams. Both were named to multiple All-NBA and All-Defensive teams. Duncan finished with 26,496 points and 15,091 rebounds. Garnett finished with 26,071 points and 14,662 rebounds. Almost identical production over almost identical career lengths. The real difference wasn't in their individual greatness. It was in the teams around them and the consistency of their organizations. Duncan played his entire career for the Spurs under Greg Popovich, one of the greatest coaches in basketball history.